Hello students, welcome to EPG Pathshala. I am Professor Ipshita Bansal from BPS Women's University, Sonipat, Haryana. Today we will be discussing about the module Strategic Human Resource Management Adding Value Through People of the paper Strategic Human Resource Management. After completing this module, the students will be able to understand the various approaches of adding value through people, the different perspectives on SHRM and organizational performance. Strategic human resource management is the practice of attracting, developing and rewarding and retaining employees for the benefit of both the employees as well as individuals and also the organization as a whole. HR department that practice strategic human resource management do not work independently in isolation. They interact with other departments within an organization in order to understand their goals and then create strategies that align with those objectives as well as those of the organization. As a result, the goals of human resource department reflect and support the goals of the rest of the organization. Strategic HRM is seen as a partner in organizational success as opposed to a necessity for legal compliance or compensation. Strategic HRM utilizes the talent and opportunity within the human resource department to make other departments stronger and more effective. When a human resource department strategically develops its plans for recruitment, training and compensation based on the goals of the organization, it is ensuring a greater chance of organizational success. Let's think about this approach in relation to a basketball team, where player A is the strategic HR department and players B through E are the other departments within the organization. The whole team wants to win the ball game and they all may be phenomenal players on their own. But one great player doesn't always win the game. If you have watched a lot of sports, you will understand that 5 great players won't win the game if each one of those 5 great players is focused on their own individual excellence. That is not how a basketball team wins, and it is not how an organization wins either. A team wins when its members support each other and work together for a common goal. Player A, our strategic HR department, must work with players B, C, D and E of our different organizational departments. They must run plays that they have planned out beforehand, assist when necessary to help another player get the basket and compensate for the weakness of one in order to create a stronger team as a whole. When a team works together to reach a common goal, only then can they be truly successful. We could also look at strategic HRM as the team captain or coach, as his or her responsibilities are little bit different from those of the other players. Human resource departments are charged with analyzing the changes that need to occur with each player or department and assisting them in strengthening any weaknesses and add value in their people. This diagram shows the HR assets and their characteristics. Firstly, the human resource managers have to understand that human resources are not owned by the firm. So they can walk over to other organizations. For them to be retained, it is important that good HR policies have to be formulated. Another important aspect is that they cannot be duplicated. Every person is a unique person. Then lastly, value of the HR may decline because of the generation of new technology or new business strategies. So it requires that human resources need to be provided training from time to time. How can value be added to the organization through people? There are 6 factors. First, strategic human resource management practices and people performance. Second, re-engineering and strategic human resource management. Third, leadership and strategic human resource management. Fourth, workplace learning and strategic human resource management. Fifth, trade union and strategic human resource management. And sixth, international and comparative strategic human resource management. Strategic human resource management practices and people performance. Let's discuss this aspect in detail. Although most SHRM models provide no clear focus for any test of the HRM performance link, the models tend to assume that an alignment between business strategy and HR strategy will improve organizational performance and competitiveness. During the past decade, demonstrating that there is indeed positive link between particular sets or bundles of HR practices and business performance has become the dominant research issue. The dominant empirical questions on this topic ask what type of performance data are available to measure the HRM performance link, and do high commitment type HRM systems produce above average results compared with control type systems. A number of studies have found that in spite of the methodological challenges, bundles of HRM practices are positively associated with superior organization performance. Re-engineering and strategic human resource management. All normative models of HRM emphasize the importance of organizational design. As previously discussed, the soft HRM model is concerned with job designs that encourage the vertical and horizontal compression of tasks and greater worker autonomy. The redesign of work organizations has been variously labeled high performing work systems, HPWS, business process re-engineering, and high commitment management. The literature emphasizes core features of this approach to organizational design and management, including a flattened hierarchy, decentralized decision making to line managers or work teams, enabling information technology, strong leadership, and a set of HR practices that make workers' behavior more congruent with the organization's culture and goals. Leadership and strategic human resource management. The concept of managerial leadership permeates and structures the theory and practice of work organizations, and hence how we understand strategic HRM. Most definitions of managerial leadership reflect the assumption that it involves a process whereby an individual exerts influence upon others in an organizational context. Within the literature, there is continued debate over the alleged differences between a manager and a leader. Managers develop plans, whereas leaders create a vision. Much of the leadership research and literature tends to be endocentric in nature and rarely acknowledges the limited representation of ethnic groups and women in senior leadership positions. The scenario needs to change in favor of not only encouraging but ensuring diversity at senior leadership positions by inclusion of women and members of the ethnic groups. The current interest in alternative leadership paradigms, variously labeled transformational leadership and charismatic leadership, may be explained by understanding the prerequisites of the resource-based SHRM model. Managers are looking for a style of leadership that will develop the firm's human endowment and moreover cultivate commitment, flexibility, innovation and change. Workplace learning and strategic human resource management. Within most formulations of strategic HRM, formal and informal work-related learning has come to represent a key lever that can help managers to achieve the substantive HRM goals of commitment, flexibility and quality. As such, this growing field of research occupies center stage in the soft people-centered SHRM model. From a managerial perspective, formal and informal learning can strengthen an organization's core competencies and thus act as a lever to sustainable competitive advantage. Having the ability to learn faster than one's competitors is of essence here. There is a growing body of work that has taken a more critical look at workplace learning. Some of these writers, for example, emphasize how workplace learning can strengthen cultural control, strengthen the power of those at the apex of the organization, and be a source of conflict when linked to productivity or flexibility, bargaining, and job control. Trade union and strategic human resource management. The issues related to impact of trade unions on strategic human resource management and vice versa are many. The notion of worker commitment embedded in the HRM model has led writers from both ends of the political spectrum to argue that there is a contradiction between the normative HRM model and trade unions. In the prescriptive management literature, the argument is that the collectivist culture with its them and us attitude sits uncomfortably with the HRM goal of high employee commitment and the individualization of the employment relationship. The critical perspective also presents the HRM model as being inconsistent with traditional industrial relations for very different reasons. Critics argue that high commitment HR strategies are designed to provide workers with a false sense of job security and to obscure underlying sources of conflict inherent in capitalist employment relations. Other scholars, taking an orthodox pluralistic perspective, have argued that trade unions and the high performance, high commitment HRM model cannot only coexist but are indeed necessary if as high performing work systems is to succeed. What is apparent is that this part of the SHRM debate has been strongly influenced by economic, political and legal developments in the United States of America and United Kingdom over the past 2 decades. Let's now talk about international and comparative human resource management. The assumption that strategic human resource management is a strategically driven management process points to its international potentialities. The employment relationship is shaped by national systems of employment legislation and the cultural context in which it operates. Thus, as the world of business is becoming more globalized, variations in national regulatory systems, labor markets and institutional and natural contexts are likely to constrain or shape any tendency towards convergence or a universal model of best HRM practice. This section addresses aspects of the international scene to help us place the discourse on the SHRM model into a wider global context. In doing so, we make a distinction between international HRM and comparative HRM. The subject matter of the former revolves around the issues and problems associated with the globalization of capitalism. Comparative HRM, on the other hand, focuses on providing insights into the nature of and reasons for differences in HR practices across national boundaries. So, what are the different perspectives on strategic human resource management and organizational performance? First, identify or design the HR strategies which fit a particular organization. Secondly, the internal fit, interconnected and mutually reinforcement HRM policies and practices have to be focused on. And finally, synergy is the main idea behind the internal fit. Let's now understand what is external fit. External fit is a range of HRM policies and practices that fit the business's strategies outside the realm of HRM. Performance will be improved when the right fit or match between business strategy and HRM policies and practices is achieved. So, what are the various approaches to fit? There are three approaches to fit. First is universalistic, second is contingency, and third is configurational. We will discuss them in detail. Let's now discuss universalistic approach. The universalistic approach or perspective suggests a specified set of HR practices, the so-called best practices, that will always produce superior results whatever the accompanying circumstances. Proponents of the universalistic model emphasize that internal fit or horizontal fit or alignment of HR practices helps to significantly improve an organization's performance. Considering that internal fit is central to the universalistic model, the main problem is how to determine an HR system or a coherent set of synergistic HR practices that blend better in producing higher business performance. The methods used in developing such HR systems depend on the additive relationship. That is the case when the HR practices involved have independent and non-overlapping effects on outcome, and on the interactive relationship. That is the case when the effect of one HR practice depends on the level of the other HR practices involved. However, it may be said that universalistic models do not explicitly consider the internal integration of HR practices and consider them merely from an additive point of view. Emerging research evidence reveals that the so-called portfolio effect, that is, how HR practices support and improve one another, it is important to remember that there can be countless combinations of practices that will result in identical business outcomes. This contributes to the concept of equifinality, in which identical outcomes can be achieved by a number of different systems of HR practices. Impact of universal HR practices on business performance. Most studies focus on three mechanisms by which universal HR practices impact on business performance. First is the human capital base or collection of human resources, that is skills, knowledge and potential that the organization has to work with. The organization's recruitment, selection, training and development processes directly affect the quality of this base. Second is motivation, which is affected by a variety of HR processes including recognition, reward and work systems. And third is opportunity to contribute, which is affected by job design and involvement or empowerment strategies. In addition, the best practices approach generally refers to the resource-based theory of the firm. The best practices approach generally refers to the resource-based theory of firm and competitive advantage, which focuses on the role of internal resources such as employees play in developing and maintaining a firm's competitive capabilities. For a resource to be a source of competitive advantage, it must be rare, valuable, inimitable and non-substitutable. Therefore, HR practices of the organization can lead to competitive advantage through developing a unique and valuable human pool. Let's now understand what is contingency approach. The contingency model, which can also be called as SHRM as strategic integration model, argues that an organization's set of SHRM policies and practices will be effective if it is consistent with other organizational strategies. External fit is basic to a contingency approach. SHRM policies and practices link with various types of generic business strategies. For example, the range of SHRM policies and practices an organization should adopt depend on the competitive product strategies it is following. Considering that external fit is the key concept of contingency models, the contingency approach refers firstly to the theory of the organizational strategy and then to the individual HR practices that interact with organizational strategy in order to result in higher organizational performance. The adoption of a contingency HRM strategy is then associated with optimized organizational performance, where the effectiveness of individual HR practices is contingent on firm's strategy. The performance of an organization that adopts HR practices appropriate for its strategy will be higher. Let's now talk about configurational approach. This is also called as HRM as bundles model, which argues that strategy's success depends on combining internal and external fit. This approach makes use of the so-called bundles of HR practices, which implies the existence of specific combinations or configurations of HR practices depending on corresponding organizational contexts, where the key is to determine which are the most effective in terms of leading to higher business performance. Considering that both the internal and external fits are the key concepts of configurational models, the configurational approach refers firstly to the theory of organizational strategy and then to the systems of HR practices that are consistent with organizational strategy in order to result in higher organizational performance. As indicated above, there are a number of strategies an organization may choose to follow. Strategic typology that identifies the 4 ideal strategic types are prospector, analyzer, defender and reactor. Configurationality or HRM as bundles. With respect to configurations of HR practices, scholars have developed theoretically driven employment systems. Specifically, Dellery and Doughty 1996 proposed the following 2 ideal type employment systems. The market type system, which is characterized by hiring from outside an organization, and the internal system, which is characterized by the existence of an internal market. Organizations adopting a defending strategy concentrate on efficiency in current products and markets. Here, the internal system is more appropriate for this type of strategy. On the other hand, organizations pursuing a prospector strategy are constantly changing, and the market system is more appropriate for this type of strategy. A possible third type of strategy can be the analyzer, at the midpoint between the prospector and the defender. In summary, according to this approach, if consistency within the configuration of HR practices and between the HR practices and strategy is achieved, then the organization will achieve better performance. So students, let's now summarize what we have studied in this module. As global business competition shifts from efficiency to innovation and from enlargement of scale to creation of value, management needs to be oriented towards the strategic use of human resources. Strategic human resource management practices enhance employee productivity and the ability of agencies to achieve their mission. Integrating the use of personnel practices into strategic planning process enables an organization to better achieve its goals and objectives. Combining human resource practices, all with a focus on the achievement of organizational goals and objectives, can have a substantial effect on the ultimate success of the organization. To manage future operations effectively, various approaches of adding value through people were discussed in this module, like strategic human resource management practices and people performance, re-engineering and SHRM, leadership and SHRM, workplace learning and SHRM, trade union and strategic human resource management, international and comparative strategic human resource management. We also discussed 3 modes of approaches to fit, that is universalistic, contingency and configurational, which are adopted in different situations or types of organizations for enhancing organizational performance. Thank you.